afternoon. Welcome to the session. Now we are going to talk about emerging trends of novel synthetic drugs, of abuse and prescription drugs. How dangerous are they? We are going to get a very important answer today. And also to talk about trends, which is very interesting, because then you get to see a bit into the future. And our first speaker is Gunnar Hermansson. He's a former detective inspector at the National Bureau of Narcotics. And right now he's the editor of that magazine that is lying on the table there. It's the magazine from the Swedish Narcotic Officers Association. And a very good one, I must say. So you who read Swedish, have a look at it. If you haven't done it before. And Gunnar Hermansson has monitored the trade of prescription drug and silent drugs, first as police and now as a journalist for many years. And I'm very excited and look forward to this. We had a small chat before and we talked about prescription drugs and so on, because I've been following designer drugs for quite a lot of years on the internet also. And I remember when I started looking for these pages and I went into the forum and everything, and you start, into this world of internet where they sell this really disgusting stuff. And then I remember I found maybe 20 pages easy about designer drugs. And I think I got two papers of online pharmacies selling illegal prescription drugs. And that was a bit of a surprise for me, because that was in 2008, 2009, when you can read everywhere in Sweden about internet drugs and legal highs and designer drugs, and no one spoke about this. So I am looking forward to hear what you have to say. Please.
Thank you, Linda. Good afternoon. Yes, as a police officer before, I worked at the National Criminal Investigation Service in the drugs unit for 12 years, and my task was to monitor prescription drugs, scheduled prescription drugs, and anabolic steroids, which also are scheduled in Sweden. And I found that it was a big problem, even 1998, so 50 years ago. Almost nobody talked about it then. But since then it has increased a lot, and now it's the second most used kind of drugs in Sweden, like in many other countries. And I agree, people don't talk about it in Sweden, like in America, for example. So the next picture here. Prescription drugs are, after marijuana and alcohol, the most commonly used substances by Americans. And it's the same here. The same in many other European countries as well. How come? Well, many young people especially, but not only young people, but young people, they think it's less dangerous drugs because they can get it from doctors. The parents, the grandparents have them at home. It's easy to get. By internet, you go to the doctor and get it for yourself and so on. So it's less dangerous, maybe, but very easy to get. I will show you some different groups of pharmaceutical or prescription drugs in the legal market here in Sweden, and also talk about the illegal market use. If we look at these statistics, there are three groups of pharmaceuticals, prescription drugs. It's benzodiazepines, which is the most common drugs in this category in Sweden. It has been for many years. The Swedes drink a lot of alcohol, and benzodiazepines work like alcohol in the brain. But you can see it's quite steady over the years. We have had this problem for many years. No big changes. The next group, the red one, is opiates, opioid painkillers, which is increasing. As you see, this is the amount of seizures made by the police in Sweden, the amount of applications, and it's very reliable, as I see it. So we can see that opiates is increasing problem here and also in many other countries. I'll come back to these categories later. There are also stimulants. Stimulants, I mean methylphenidate and dextroamphetamine, medicines given to persons, not only young persons, who are diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. Not so many seizures, but it's about 400 increase in 5 years. If you look at the benzodiazepines, the sedatives, tranquilizers, so there are some who are very popular among the abusers. And alprazolam is number 1 nowadays in Sweden. Definitely, it's increasing for every year, and it's the most demanding benzodiazepines in the market. The second place, diazepam, it was number 1 before, but now it's decreasing a little bit, so it's now number 2. Number 3, the names after Xanol, Valium, and so on, it's brand names in Sweden. There are other names abroad. Clonazepam, called Iptoril here, is number 3. It's very popular, very potent benzo, and very popular in Sweden and Norway, actually. Also, you can see it on the internet. It's increasing. Number 4, flunitrazepam was number 1 a few years ago when we had Rohypnol here. Rohypnol is no longer registered pharmaceutical in Sweden, but it was until 2003, I think. And for some years there it was really number 1 among producers. But we took some measures together with manufacturer Roche in Kassel, and the smuggling was stopped at that time. And the brand name Rohypnol was no longer registered in Sweden as a medicine. But we have flunitrazepam in other tablets as well, so there is an abuse. And we also have the non-benzo tablets, Zopiclone, Zolpidem, in the legal market. They are, we know now, also popular among users. They are sleeping pills. Many people don't compare them with benzodiazepines, but the abusers do. Well, I can tell you, when the abusers take benzodiazepines, it's not to get sleep mainly. It's that if you take one tablet, if you want to go to sleep, one tablet at the bed and then go to sleep, it works. But if you take 3, 4, 5 tablets, like abuser, and you are in a party environment, you don't get sleepy, you get active. It's another work another way, and no inhibitions, altered. Well, you can do things you wouldn't do otherwise. Many people inject these tablets, crush them and smoke them, crush them and snort them, inhale in the nose. And it will give other effects, of course. Yeah. The big group nowadays, the increasing group, is the opioid prescription painkillers. As you can see, the most popular of them here among abusers. And the last year, the newest trend is to smoke fentanyl patches. especially in the county of Halland in southwest of Sweden, but not only there, but especially there. It was very popular last year, from March last year until the beginning of this year. Around 8 people died of overdoses of fentanyl, smoking fentanyl. And they use bulbs like this. And they open the bulb in the bottom and put 2 pipes in it, and they also put, let's say, 1 or 2 pieces of a fentanyl patch. It's cut in pieces, because fentanyl is extremely potent drug. So one patch is too much. A couple of small pieces in this bulb, and then the pipes, and then you heat under the bulb and inhale the gases. And sometimes it's too much. Even if you only have a couple of pieces, it's too much. So there will be an overdose, people die. Maybe they also use benzodiazepines together with the fentanyl, and that would be very, very strong effect. We have had cases where people not only smoke, they chew these patches. There was a doctor, he prescribed for himself, and then he cut them and chewed them. He used fentanyl like that. One of these patches, as I say, it contained 100 microgram, not milligram, microgram per hour. It releases 100 microgram per hour in the skin. The patch contains totally 16 milligram of fentanyl. After 3 days, after 72 hours of use, it should be switched and then given back to the pharmacy. But after 3 days, there's still 9 milligram of fentanyl in the patch. But it's not, they don't use it as a medicine longer, but there is a second-hand market of the patches after 3 days of use. So that's a really new channel. Morphine pills, like Dolcontin, the well-known Dolcontin in Sweden, and oxycodone, Oxycontin, Oxynorm. Those pills are used as pills, of course, orally, and they are injected, crushed and injected. And also there we had last year some overdoses in different parts of Sweden, mainly in the north of Sweden. They injected morphine, Dolcontin tablets, and together with benzo, for example, cannabis, alcohol, maybe it can be too much. They stop bleeding and die. Methadone is, of course, a use problem, but not too much. There's a diversion from treatment programs, and there's some smuggling from Denmark, but it's a quite small problem compared to buprenorphine, Subutex and Suboxone. That's a real big problem nowadays. We had it in treatment for 13 years now in Sweden, since 1999. And we can see the seizures, it's increasing every year as long as prescriptions increase. Subutex is abused, not only used as it should be, as a tablet in the mouth. When people abuse Subutex, they inject or they snort them. And not one pill, because a pill, one tablet, is very, very expensive. 30 to 50, 60 euros each is good. And therefore they use only a little piece of a tablet. Let's say 10 to 15% of a tablet each time. And crush it, dissolve and inject. And it works like heroin. It gives like a heroin kick. or if they start it. But many young people, or it says anyway, that young people, they start abusing with Subutex tablet because it's available all over the country. We have a lot of programs, a lot of places where people are treated with Subutex, Subuxol, and there is a diversion. We know that some people most of them get 2 or 3 tablets every day in treatment. After, let's say, 6 months, they get 1 week, tablets for 1 week, they can bring home, and later for 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks at a time. And I know that many of them, they don't need 2 or 3 tablets a day. We have examples, and they sell them because they are, as I said, very expensive. They can sell them. There was a man recently, he was convicted 2 years in jail. He sold 450 tablets in 1 year to some young people in northern Sweden, 300 crowns each, 30 euro each. And then we have tramadol. In Sweden we know what tramadol is. It has been scheduled very recently, 2 months ago. Before, tramadol as a substance was scheduled, and now even the tablets are scheduled. And there is a huge abuse of tramadol here. Tramadol is very available in the internet because it's not scheduled in most countries in the world. Like codeine, we have also some use of codeine tablets. The third group is stimulants containing methylphenidate. In Sweden they are called Ritalin and Concerta. You can see the seizure figures here. It's increasing the last 5 years in the same amount as prescription. The legal prescriptions are. They have risen 400% in 5 years. So that's the seizures. We also have some use of dextroamphetamine and some legal use as well. It's not a registered prescription drug in Sweden, but doctors can prescribe it with a license here. So we also have them in the legal market because of that. Many of these pills can be sold, can be ordered by internet. This website is called Trusted Online Pharmacy. There are many of them. I don't know why they call them trusted. Maybe it's not trusted, but who knows?
I'm going there after this.
They offer a wide range of different lifestyle tablets and scheduled pills and so on. Among Adderall is dextroamphetamine and Ritalin here, yes. So, but who knows? We don't know where, from which country we order, when we order for this website, for example. And there's another, there are, as I said, many of them. I found it the other day. It's called Get Your Mess. Get Your Mess. And I think this is not reliable. It doesn't look very serious. Or, what do you say? It's very simple. It's very simple. They usually have a picture of a doctor or a nurse or so, but not this one. But they have a lot of different pharmaceuticals here, prescription drugs. For example, anxiety, or these benzo preparations, Xanax, Alprazolam, Valium, diazepam, and so on. Lexotanil is a bromazepam. We don't have it in Sweden, but it's smuggled in Sweden sometimes. Very, very potent as well. They also have, their top sellers are oxycodone, sibutramine, it's a stimulant, Adderall, dextroamphetamine, as I say. But I think if you order here, it's most likely you will have an envelope with some pills after a week or so, most likely. Because these people, they want to make money, they don't want to cheat you, they want to make money. And the pills are very easy to get wherever they have their business. Normally very easy to get. Maybe they are counterfeited. I will also show you a website which is definitely not serious. But who knows? You can't just tell. It's in English mostly, Italian also, and in Swedish. That's in Swedish. World tramadol, because tramadol, when it entered the illegal market 2004 or 5, people could buy tramadol substance, pure substance, from India, from China and so on, and they did, and they could sell it like this on the internet, because it was still legal in Sweden. So this web page, the police found it in 2007, and late that year it was scheduled in tramadol as a substance. But they continued to sell, and the police made an order, made a purchase, was instructed to pay money for say 5 grams of tramadol powder. They were instructed to pay the money to a bank account, so it was very easy to follow the money. The money, or the account owner was a man in Eskilstuna, it's a city 110 kilometers from here. He was a barber. He had given up the barbering, started this business. And police started to investigate him, and during that time, during the investigation, he was not arrested. He got 2 barrels from India containing 10 kilos of pure tramadol each. They arrived at the customs in Holland. And the police delivered the barrels to him as a DHL person. And when he received it and signed it, they arrested him. Later they found that he made his business in a small room in the basement where he lived in the house. He could sleep there sometimes. There was a computer, different things, and here he expedited the orders from the customers who ordered here. There is a barrel containing 10 kilograms of tramadol powder, pure tramadol. So the police identified 500 customers, not only young people, many young people, but different ages, and half of them, more than half of them, were not known before as a user. So they looked up each and every one of them and charged them for this purchase. And this man, he was sentenced to 10 years in jail in Sweden. There are not only internet, other ways to get this in the illegal market, to get these pills. Improper prescriptions is a good way. And mainly these prescriptions are made by male doctors, middle-aged or elderly, and general practitioner they're working from home, from the flat, from the house where they live. But not only, there are women, there are younger doctors, there are doctors in hospitals also, but mainly it is this category. And there are only different reasons. Deliberately for the money is one, it's a criminal reason. Before, it has not been the case for the police with this kind of activities. But last year there was a doctor, the police and the prosecutor started to investigate a doctor in Stockholm. He prescribed a lot of mainly benzodiazepines to abusers in Stockholm. And he was sentenced later to 4 years in jail. It was the first one in Sweden where they could prove that he sold recipes, he sold prescriptions, he sold tablets to the abusers. During 10 months, he was investigated 10 months. That time, that period, he had prescribed more than 200,000 tablets. More than 200. So there is a big source to the illegal market. Other reasons could be they feel sorry for the abusers. They say if they don't get it for me, they will get it illegally in the street. So therefore it's better I prescribe it for them. They are incautious and careless. They don't suspect anything. People go from doctor to doctor to doctor and get a small amount from every doctor. Some doctors have a drug abuse of their own. Quite common. Some are very old, 85, 90 years old, and still prescribe scheduled drugs. And some are threatened. It's a reason for them to do this. They are threatened by the patients. All these, except for that one, all these reasons, they are normally the case for the National Bureau of Health and Welfare to investigate and to withdraw license or will give them other kind of punishments. But nowadays there is another doctor now sitting in jail, sitting in the custody in Stockholm, suspected for the same, about the same as the first one, prescribing a lot of tablets to abusers. Some of them even have died in this case. Smuggling is also a way to get into the illegal market. Some people, like this one, he bought 3,000 blue Valium. It's a Valium diazepam, 10 milligrams. 3,000 each time from a source in Pakistan. Pakistan is a country where there are many people who are selling just Valium. And India, South America, Thailand, and many other countries. If you get contact with somebody in these countries who can easily buy, the problem is the customs in Sweden. I mean, the persons in these countries, they will deliver, they will try to hide it from the customs, but the customs sometimes find it as well, like in this case. He had received 7 or 8 times, 3,000 each time when he was arrested, this man in the north. And then he sold it to friends and others in this town. Yeah, it's about €2 per tablet. In Norway, the customs in Norway, Svinesund is a southern border point, the main road from Gothenburg to Oslo. They, during 3 months this winter, made 6 seizures of clonazepam tablets. This bag contains 20,000 tablets. Some people who came with by train, by car, had between 20 and 40,000 tablets in the baggage. And 6 such smuggling occasions in 3 months, around 180,000 tablets. All of them were clonazepam tablets. So it shows that it's a very popular drug in Norway. Also a way to get illegal pharmaceutical drugs in the market. The police raided this house some years ago. It was in the countryside, in the county of Dalarna. It's 250 kilometers from here, northwest. They had suspicions, and they investigated for some months, surveyed, and when they raided the house, they found 5 people sitting in different places in the house and making capsules, filling capsules with powder. And the powder was flour, wheat flour, mixed with alprazolam. It's quite easy to get alprazolam from China, alprazolam pure powder, 98–99% pure. And they had 1.6 kilos of alprazolam. They had a lot of wheat flour, and they filled, they mixed it, 1% alprazolam. They mixed it in small capsules. You can see it, the police came, it was a bit messier capsules all over the place. Very, very easy, very simple way to do it. But there were 5 people, and they filled a lot of capsules every day. They also, in this house, they made anabolic steroids. You can buy, and people buy very, very often nowadays, the substance, the pure substance of anabolic steroids as well from China. And they mix it with oil back home. They buy these glasses, capsules, all kind of equipment via the internet legally. The substance is the illegal thing in this. And they sell it via internet. Very, very common. So the last slide here is about anabolic steroids. Before, it was quite easy to go to the South Europe, Greece, Italy, maybe Spain, to buy these ampoules and tablets in different countries, and the eastern countries as well. It's very, very, it's much more difficult now to get it legally. Nowadays, they buy the substance from China, they buy this equipment, they fill ampoules, vials, make the labels in the computer very easy, and sell it by internet. This is, let's say, 80% of this market nowadays. Homemade tablets or vials for injection. The only, for medical use, we have only patches and gel. It's testosterone given to men as a substitution medicine. Otherwise, it's illegal production. And we can talk a lot about this, but I think that we'll stop here and give the word for Peter.
Thank you, Gunnar. I can ask you a quick question while Peter can take over the mic and arrange the slide and so on. I was thinking, you lined up these 3 different kinds of medicines. Can you also see a trend on who is using? Is this like, are teenagers using it? Is it a middle-aged woman? Or do you know anything about it? Who is online buying all this? Because apparently there are many, many pages selling this.
Well, there are not only young people, it's all kind of people buying online. And you mentioned middle-aged women, they can easily go to the doctor and get it legally, and they do, like middle-aged men. So, and sometimes young people, but for young people it's easier to buy via the internet.
So the quick and fast answer is mostly young people? Is that what we think?
Most,
do we
yes,
know, or?
mostly, but not
only. Is there any questions right now for Gunnar, or otherwise we will wait for questions and collect them on the end, maybe? Yeah?
You know, those people buying medicine from the internet, you know, those people selling medicine from the internet. How do you, I'm Hatishima from Brunei, and I just wanted to find out, how do you monitor or any prevention on those people selling the medicine online, and people are buying it through online? So is there any egg or anything under any prevention on that? And how do you monitor, and how do you know that they're selling, you know, also nowadays we can find through the internet, you know, people
Yes, I showed this this one. The Swedish police could act against this person because he was acting here in Sweden. But if he's acting in your country, for example, it's not nothing we can do from here. And most of these websites, they are present service abroad. But in case they are in Sweden, we can take measures for the police. It's the only way. Otherwise, if it's we can contact, if we can trace them to a certain country, we can contact that country to take action, but it's up to them. It's it's easy to find them in the net, but it's very difficult to find the persons behind. There could be in different countries. The website is administered, it's a survey of one country, the people are from another country, the money goes to the third country. Yes?
Yes. I wonder, do you have any statistic about how many self-medicine, or is it drug addicts who buy it from the page?
You mean they buy it for self-medication?
Or drug addicts?
No, they are not. No, but I can guess it's both. I don't know the proportions, but I guess it's both reasons. For self-medication and to get high. So we don't need a doctor nowadays, actually. Yes.
Thank you. Now I think we'll shift and Peter will come up and bring out his slide. But I think that the last question there was what we started with, that this is a problem that we don't discuss it that much, as we do, for example, with the legal highs here in Sweden, and also we don't know as much about it as we probably should know more about it. Who is using? Why are they using? And so on. Because from that we can also start acting on what can we do to prevent it, of course. But now we shall. Peter is getting ready over there. This is Peter Hultén, and he is from the Swedish Poisonous Information Center. English, I have learned recently. He's a licensed pharmacist and an expert on drug of abuse. And Peter has learned me everything I know about chemistry. And I was very excited the first time I heard him. So excited, so I actually thought about going to a chemistry course. So you have something to look forward to here. Yeah.
Thank you very very much. I will try not to do too much chemistry, because I will probably bother you too much about that. But what I work with is actually this. This is what I work with. You know, this is our abbreviations of different internet drugs, or designer drugs, or legal highs, or whatever you call them. But this is my work. This is what I actually do. To try to find out how does this act? How do they affect us when you take them? And that's very difficult. But this is where we are. We have been talking sometimes about old substances like methadone, MDPV, other substances are like the LSD or ecstasy or heroin. But my world is this. This is a new kind of world. And of course you can find them on different pages as well. I will try today to classify recreational drugs, or drugs of abuse, or you can have a different couple of names of it. But both as how do they act as toxic CNS syndromes, how do they act on the central nervous system, and also then talk a little about traditional use, structural similarity with neurotransmitters, what we normally have in our bodies, in our brains, and classification of new recreational drugs in another matter, how the chemistry looks like. And also show you some case reports from the real world, how these actually act. Then we talk a little about epidemiology and recent new approaches, how to decrease availability and increase knowledge. Because that's important, and that's what you're talking about all these 3 days, of course. We start very briefly with toxic CNS syndromes. CNS is the central nervous system. How do they affect us? We have the GHB, GBL, sedatives. Gunnar was talking about the benzodiazepines and similar substances. They are all unspecific. We're acting on the central nervous system and giving you depression. You're getting tired, somnolent, sleepy, having difficulties to breathe when you are getting too CNS depressed. Then you have the opiate syndrome, of course, with small pupils, also the CNS depression, very typical, and you also have breathing problems, because this acts on the breathing center. So central acting. This is not something you feel. It's actually something that just happens. And then we have the anticholinergic syndrome, like the antihistamines, the atropine. You're getting sweaty, your mouth getting dry, you have hallucinations, for example. You can also get tachycardic in this reason, and have a high pulse. And then you can classify them also as sympathomimetic syndromes. And that means the amphetamines, the cocaine, the ecstasy, they are giving high pulse, you have elevated blood pressure, you have a high temperature, high body temperature, and you also get wide pupils. Instead of the opiate syndrome, when you have small pinpoint pupils, you get wide pupils for the symptomatic syndrome. And then you have the serotonin syndrome, the LSD effect. You all know who actually invented the LSD. You know?
Hoffman. Dr. Hoffman by accident.
Yeah. Oh, Albert Hoffman. And how did he do it?
He was trying to find an analgesic, and he ended up creating this this thing that he thought he could use to get mental ill patients to come out of their body and go back into them again.
Yeah. And he actually, by accident, did this when he was going home on his bike, actually. So he was actually got a little part of the powder of LSD on his fingers, and then he actually ingested it. And then on the way back, he was feeling very strange and having hallucinations and strange feelings. After that, it was called the Bicycle Day. So they actually celebrate that with stamps sometimes, at least in the 50s, 60s. Because this was a long time ago. And you could say that the serotonin syndrome is a milder type of syndrome of the sympathetic one. You have wide pupils, you have a high pulse, you have a slightly elevated blood pressure. You can get a rise in the temperature, body temperature, but that's not very common. And you get somnolent, and you can also get seizures, convulsions. To go back, what I work with is, all these sites. Gunnar has shown you a couple. These are just a couple of examples. You have so many internet websites on the internet that if you're going to be there and to know everything, you have to be on them, to be out there, to look at them. And that's very difficult. It takes a long time. So what about traditional use? You could actually use the flyagaric, as we call it in Sweden, rödflugsvamp. The flyagaric mushroom, Amanita muscaria, it contains muscimol and nicotinic acid. These substances are hallucinogenic. They give hallucinations. And it's known for the shamans in Siberia that they actually give this effect. There are archaeological proofs of this. And it also said that the Vikings, their berserker rages were because of this. And when you can see on the slide also that this is the berserker, depicted like a wolf's head. So he actually had this berserker rage. But that's not really true. There are no real proof for this second one, only for the shamans in Siberia. And you also have, of course, the magic mushrooms. I will come back to them. Which contains psilocybin, which easily is transferred to psilocybin in the body. The peyote cacti and the Peruvian torch contains mescaline, one of the most hallucinogenic substances. And if you look at the similar structure, the similarity to our normal neurotransmitters, we have a dopamine for mood. It's one of the most important ones, the noradrenaline, which gives the effects of high blood pressure, high pulse, for example. So you know that noradrenaline when you're really active and up and going, and adrenaline is the serotonin for, of course, to feel content. You can see all the structures here. They look pretty much the same. You can see the phenethylamine, which is also actually acting in the body. It is a normal substance in your body. And this is actually part of all these. So here you have your chemistry. It's all part of this. You can also see here, there is 1 and 2 and 3 carbonyls. It's almost similar. And you can see that serotonin is similar to tryptamine. And tryptamines is a very common group that, with the drugs of abuse. Amphetamine is also very similar. Just to give you a perspective how they look like, how similar they are. So how dangerous are these new recreational drugs? This was a study made or published in Lancet in 2010. And you can see that when drug experts in the UK were asked to classify different drugs, both according to harm to users in the blue and harm to others, you can see that alcohol comes out in the top. And that's something you're discussing here these days a lot, of course, and it's because it is a big problem. It's something that you actually see a lot. And then you have heroin, crack cocaine, methamphetamine, cocaine, tobacco, and so on. And the only really new drug here on this slide is the methadone. All the others you know about and they have been on the market for a long time. But not this one. We know very little about this. That could also be the reason we don't really know how dangerous is it. Because that's the problem. With all these new drugs, they come and they go. They come and they go. Very quickly. So we don't really get to know how dangerous are they. I will try to classify them a little, and also according to a little more, not only how they act, but also the phenethylamine derivatives. You have the naturally occurring mescaline, you saw in the cactus species. And well-known substances that are similar are amphetamine and ecstasy. But the new ones, these are the cathinone derivatives. You may have heard about methadone, MDP, methadone, pentadrone, whatever they call. But it's a lot of different names. You don't have to know all these names, of course. And bromodragonfly, amphetamine, other amphetamine derivatives, they are acting on the norepinephrine we're talking about on the page. Any norepinephrine and serotonin and dopamine. So they are releasing norepinephrine, they are releasing dopamine, and they are also acting on the serotonergic system. So they are actually acting on all three systems, which is very important, which gives a lot of effects. We also have the cocaine derivatives, the naturally occurring, of course, because cocaine. Here it's more difficult to say, are these really something that acts like cocaine? Cocaine is giving the same effects as the phenethylamine, but also have a much more serious risk of also affecting the heart, to have a cardiac arrhythmia. And the dimethylpain and Laracaine, as it's called, is doubt. There is doubt if this is actually a psychoactive substance. It may only be anesthetic agent working like, but if it's an anesthetic agent, it's not really in this group. And then you have the 4-fluorotropylcocaine, which is a psychoactive substance. That one. I also put a picture of this book. Has anyone read it? If you're into this world, you can go and read it, because it's The Doors of Perception is called. It was made by Aldous Huxley, and it's actually describing a mescaline use. How mescaline is used and how it affects you. It's got quite a vibrant picture of how mescaline is used. And this book is also known for the American rock group The Doors took its name from this book. To give it a little more difficult, this is another way of classifying it, even further. But we will skip this very quickly. But you can see that you have the amphetamines and then you have different ones. You have ring substituted ones. And you have the one that looks like ecstasy. You have a lot of difficult things here to how to classify them. So the effects, I talked a little about this. The phenethylamines gives hallucinations, agitation, confusion. Their aggressiveness is quite common. High pulse, wide pupils, cardiac arrest. This is the main risks. And what you see on the studying a patient. But for the bromodragonfly, which I will come back to now, there is a risk for a severe constriction of blood vessels with very long duration, several days. And you may have seen some of these pictures before. This is an extremely potent serotonin agonist. This works on the serotonin receptors. And it has normally initial symptoms come very early, and the maximum effect is half a day, something like that. But in extreme cases, up to 9 days. And this was a case report with a 34-year-old male. He shed an unknown amount of bromodragonfly as a bottle blotter with his friend. Next day, his friend was lying dead on the floor. He was found by his brother, this 34-year-old man, and he was almost also dead. He came into hospital with respiratory problems, low blood pressure, cold peripheral extremities, wide pupils, general convulsive seizures. So he was very, very bad. And no urine production at that time. First blood gas showed severe acidosis, which is very, very big problem. With a high lactate value, that means that the muscle are not really working. He was put on a respirator, given intravenous fluids and noradrenaline, and he was also dialyzed. On day 2, there was more intense discoloration, especially on the feet and hand, and cold extremities. Even the tip of the nose and the lips were affected. There were a lot of different medical protocols were given during the following days, but all measures were without an apparent effect. It looks like this. You can see rather clearly here. And on day 9, the spasm, the constriction ceased. The extremities then became red and swollen. They had to do repeated dialysis of him for several times, and 3 weeks later the kidney function was normalized. It took a long time to get this normal kidney function back. Daily infusions of medicines were given during 2 weeks to improve his status, especially his constriction of the blood vessels, so that they could actually have some oxygen out to the hand and feet. And all his phalanges on the left hand were amputated 7 weeks after the intoxication. Later on, also parts of the toes of both feet had to be amputated as well. But the only thing found was the bromodragonite. And it looked like this. You can see that the thumb was all black. And the next picture is a little, if you're, you may want to close your eyes. This is the end result of how he turned out. He was a 34-year-old man. Earlier he was tried some cannabis and some other drugs, but then he was drug-free for 5 or 6 years. Had a new family with a daughter, and this was a one-time thing he did. But it ended up really bad. So, what about bath salt? Are they dangerous? They are not only for the bathtub. So what are bath salts? Have you heard about bath salts? Yeah? It can look like this, but it can also be snorted, or ingested, or taken as an injection. And they are advertised on the internet. There are a lot of places you can buy them. This is a page that is actually in different languages. There are even different currencies. But this is the Swedish part of it. But it's Ivory Wave is another name here. You have different names on each of these. Concentrated bath salt, it says. Buy one, get one free. So bath salt, but it looks like it's a more American one than something else. This is very common now. In Sweden there is a mini epidemic in the city of Västerås, or the close proximity. It's about an hour drive from here. And this also made a large change. I don't know if you were here, you probably discussed this yesterday when you were talking about legislation and how dangerous drugs are. But last year in Sweden there was a conviction that was changed in the High Court that actually turned these prisoners that actually were sentenced to jail for long prison sentences. They changed the way of how to deal with these drugs, so that they actually were prosecuted for this long time. It shouldn't be. Because the High Court said that instead of getting 10 years, you should get 4 years or 5 years. And that's why they asked for pardon, cancellation of penalty. And it's also very popular in this is the radio, it's webpage for the radio. More younger are using MTV, a caffeine derivative that is also known for being in bath salts. And this mini epidemic of MDPV in the area around the city of Västerås, I asked different laboratories. The laboratory of forensic medicine, for example, who tests urine samples. In their cases, 60% of all cases positive for MDPV this year, 2012, so this is very recent. In so-called drug abuse cases were positive for MDPV. But that means that 60% of all cases from all over Sweden came from this little area. Asking the Laboratory of Forensic Science, who deals with the powder and the tablets and so, of 110 confiscations with amounts varying from 0.02 grams to 80 grams, 70 were from this area. That means also 60%. It's also a very high number. And so far this year we know that 3 confirmed cases of death and 1 likely, the 4th one is also dealing because of MDPV. And I don't know yet if all of these came from Västerås area, but they may have. And how do you get when being affected by this kind of drug? This is a case report of a similar one. A 24-year-old man visited a friend. He took a shower and remained there for 30 minutes. Suddenly he screamed and his friend found him with ongoing painful muscle contractions. Soon he became unconscious. An ambulance arrived and sedatives were given intravenously with a very good effect. At hospital he was unconscious with a fever of 41.7. And this is very dangerous if you have a high fever like this. White pupils, blood pressure very low, heart rate was 180, and his oxygen saturation was very low. He had a very big problem with his breathing. And about 40%, 50% dies when they have a fever like this after taking a drug. 1 hour after initial stabilization, he got a cardiac arrest. At the hospital, adrenaline and multiple defibrillations were tested, and his heart rhythm was restored, and he was coming back to life. At the intensive care unit, he was put on the ventilator, given cold fluids intravenously to lower his blood temperature. Another cardiac arrest appeared, and he got severe lung problems. He had the difficulties, the oxygen saturation went even further down to 75%. He had a multiple organ failure, it developed rapidly, and he was starting to bleed from different organs. The following day he had another cardiac arrest, and he died 16 hours after arriving to the hospital. Laboratory data showed no signs of infection. The only thing that could be found was methadone, a similar drug to MDPV. Methadone concentration was very high, 13.2, compared to what has been found in living users, 1.2 to 4.8. The other groups, the LSD group, we talked about that one, so I will not come back to that, but that's also naturally occurring in different herbs, in different plants, and it's rather common to have seeds from Ipomoea and Algerine and also Hawaiian baby woodroot seeds, for example. You may have heard of those. You have the tryptamines. There you have psilocybin, the DMT, the 5-MeO-DMT. You have new ones as well, and these binds to serotonergic receptors. And then you have a new group, or fairly new, because there are coming a lot more substances in this group. Ketamine and phencyclidine has been known for a long time. Ketamine as an anesthetic agent in hospitals and in ambulances. Phencyclidine as the Angels does in the States especially. I don't know if you have it in Australia, but still. But in the States,
sorry, PCP?
Yeah, the PCP.
Not a lot of it, no.
So it's mainly the States that actually has been very, very common. Not here in Sweden. we have almost not seen it, at least not since the 80s, I think. But we see this, the methoxetamine. It has been very common. But I will show you this one. I found this on the internet. It's actually a newspaper ad. So this is how they did in the old days. They advertised for magic mushroom trays. Grow your own mushrooms in your own home. Enjoy the thrill of picking fresh, delicious mushrooms at home. Keep your table supplied for months. This was actually found in the Popular Science magazine in March 1948. Oh wow. But today, they don't advertise like this because it's illegal. Instead, they send this. Oh. Let's see if I can. Let's show.
Right click in the front.
Try to delete it so I can show you. Sorry for that.
F5.
Got to have the shift F5. There it is. Today it's more coming like this. You have a box with gravel, with nothing else. The mushrooms are not there, so you're not supposed to see it yet. So there is a box of gravel coming into the customs or to the police, and when you're putting them with some water under a lamp with a hot lamp, then there are growing mushrooms. This is a new way of smuggling drugs over here. But the reason, the latest thing is not this either. It's actually, if you do this, water them, put them under a lamp, there are no mushrooms to grow up. Because you have to have a syringe with a micelle of mushroom spores. That you get from another cell to you at another time. So it's actually, you have to have both of them. And that's a tricky question legislatively. How is this illegal or not? I will not go into that today. So how can this, what kind of effects can this give? Yes, this was a 28-year-old man of bizarre appearance. He ingested magic mushrooms together with a friend. Strange behavior after 20 minutes. The friend left. Suddenly, he had visual hallucinations and a sudden tremendous hunger. And he saw McDonald's on the other side of the street. And in the restaurant, the man was crying for food, jumped over the counter and started to eat hamburgers in a completely uncontrolled way. Staff and customers fled into the corners and were very frightened. The police arrived and he had just eaten his 20th Big Mac. This is true, actually. He came into hospital, had handcuffs, shouted for more food, was growling at the nurses and bared his teeth, was already ripping out hair of from his head, and clinical investigation was impossible. He was preliminarily diagnosed as an acute psychosis and treated with haloperidol, whereupon he could be put to bed with paralysis sleep. And on day 2 and 3 he was awake, but it was not possible to talk to him at all. The patient told his story on day 4, and the proper diagnosis: mushroom poisoning with psilocybin semi-lambda, which is a mushroom that you can easily pick out in the forest in Sweden. And he was discharged. This is nowadays this is going under the name of Mac attack. And this is also one of the recent ones that we actually have a problem here in Sweden, the methoxetamine. It's actually also called the rufflecopter, rolling on the floor, laughing, cracking our pants, totally ruined. I don't know why it became such popular when the advertising is about how you shit yourself. It's very strange. Common symptoms are high pulse and clouded consciousness, normally also somnolence, and other symptoms are hallucinations and psychosis-like symptoms. This 22-year-old man took an unknown amount of methamphetamine. He snorted and put it under the tongue. He arrived at the emergency department. He was agitated, had a slightly elevated temperature. Blood pressure was also a little high. He had slight respiratory problems. He was observed at the intensive care unit, initially with the help of a security officer, because he was very agitated. Motor activity was present, agitated with hallucinations, and he was treated by sedatives and when he fell asleep. Next morning, no respiratory or heart problems, but still marked agitation. He was sent to the psychiatrist after 9.5 hours of observation. And the next ones, I will go briefly through because we are short of time, so you have some time for questions as well. The cannabinoid receptor agonists, those that are looking are similar to cannabis, and you are talking about that a lot, so we'll not go through that. The piperazines, then you have the belladonna alkaloids, which is mostly common in plants, and you also have these plants. Do you know what this is? Have you seen them before? So they are actually part of what is in spice. You heard about spice? You probably heard about spice. Cannabinoid receptor agonists. But spice was first encountered, I would say, in 2007. And it was actually first marketed on the internet as an exotic incense blend which released a rich aroma. But later analysis has shown that they also contain they sprayed synthetic cannabinoid receptor agonists, what is the group called, on the plant material. So there were actually synthetic substances. And we saw these cases at the poison center, normally mild poisonings with high pulse and mild elevated blood pressure, and they were quite easily treated. But they were there, they were very common. And we can see that on the statistics as well. In 2007, there were a couple of cases, and then in 2008, around 40, and then 2010, we had suddenly 140 cases. It was a very high increase. And then 2011, it's still quite a lot of questions. I would say actually gone down now. I don't know if it's the same all over, but for us it's nice. Maybe people know more about it. And what kind of symptoms did they get? They got a high pulse, drowsiness, white pupils, muscular effects, and anxiety, vomiting, hypertension. And we could also classify this according to a special score called the poisoning severity score. And there 75% were mild and 25% were moderate. We didn't find any severe cases or cases of death in this material. I will skip that one. And you also have others, new ones, salvinorine, working on opiate receptor kappa, beta-guanine on other opiate receptors, myristicine and LVC in the nutmeg. So we use that in the kitchen maybe. They contain, the nutmeg contains myristicine and LVC. They are MAO, monoamine oxidase inhibitors, which actually increases the effect of other substances. But they are also working on serotonin receptors. In Sweden we had this problem with the krypton, a new deadly internet drug. In 2009 there were 9 cases of death with this drug. And, but 8 of them were found outside hospital. And almost all of them had also ingested a lot of other substances. So you can't really be sure that it was because of this substance. There was a synthetic substance put into this krypton, and it was the O-desmethyl tramadol, the tramadol-like substance, and we're going to talk about tramadol. And this probably gave some of the effects, and this were mainly the breathing problems and the stopped breathing. That's probably what they died. And then you have some others, the new benzodiazepine that is popular, the etisolone. It's a new one. We had a phenazepam before, and we made it as a narcotic drug. Now we have a new one, the etisolone, instead. We have the phenibut, which is a GABA analog. It's like GHB. Talking about that. And then you also have the possibility of putting other adult drugs. I had in a recent article in Clinical Toxicology that was published, they're discussing the levamisole. That's a substance that is for worms or for parasites when you treat patients with. But this is actually put into cocaine. It's very common. In 2009, 70% of all the seizures, confiscations in the States were containing levamisole. It's very common. And this also now is discussed that it has an effect of its own, so that it actually increases the effect of the cocaine. The internet and novel recreational drugs, they are, of course, products frequently labeled not for human consumption and sold under the non-drug names like bath salt, plant food, research chemical. You can see here the plant feed, but it says at the same time methadone. You can also see this, you probably have the white beans, very similar to that, and not for human consumption here. And it's used to circumvent trading standards and medicine's law. So why is this so popular in Sweden? Have you any ideas? Why is it so popular in Sweden? Because it is popular, I would say. In my opinion, it's popular. It could be because of this reason. If you look at the internet users, the percentage of population, Sweden is in the top. We have almost 100% of internet users. And you can look at states, for example, are rather down below. It could be a reason, but I'm not sure. If you look into the EU statistics, you have also an increasing trend of new psychoactive substances. This is from the EMCDDA, where you have about 30 and then 45, and this is an old picture. It was actually 49 last year. It was an increase even last year. 49 new psychiatric substances within the EU countries. You can also look at the internet retailers. This is also a picture from the EMCDDA, where you can see that 2010 there were a few internet retailers selling different kind of drugs, but then you have a lot to do something like that. A lot of places where you can buy it. And our own statistics look like this. You can see, we heard, if you listen to Håkan Leifman and Gunnar Hermansson about which year the change of alcohol went down and the cannabis went up, it's about 2006-2007. It coincides with actually our statistic as well, where we see a rather dramatic increase of numbers of cases and values regarding other diseases, that is, the new drugs. And looking a little more into last year, a lot of these are unknown. We don't know what it is. And even if we should know, even if we have a lot of names, it's rather common that it actually isn't what's labeled or what's said to be. If you analyze it, it can easily be something else. That's very common. And you can see here, methoxetamine, even if we only have a few cases the first half of last year, we had almost 40 cases last year. Since 2008, approximately 60 cases of death with new recreational drugs that's occurred in Sweden. That is not sad that they are the cause of the death, but they have been detected in these cells. So what I will stop with is to show you this picture. What we started now to do is a novel approach in detecting emerging recreational drugs, the C-Drug project. We at the Poison Center, we try we get an inquiry from hospitals regarding these kind of drugs, and we try to give them some treatment guidelines. In that case, we also get some information about which new drug it is. We sent that to the Karolinska laboratory, which can analyze or buy the substance so they can start analyzing. And they get serum and urine samples from the hospital, from the emergency departments, from the intensive care units all over Sweden. And this is free for the hospital. So it's paid by our project at the moment. So the hospital can send urine and serum and blood samples and get analytical results back, what can be detected. And we also get the medical chart and medical record, so we know a little more about this. And hopefully we can give some improved information and treatment guidelines. Don't have time for more, I think, so I will stop now. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Oh, there are a lot of questions. So just hang on, and you first, and then Shane back there.
Okay. Synthetic cannabinoids.
It's on.
Black spots.
Yes.
How come it's so hard to get tests? Do you meet the young
For you?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Because it is difficult. When we test them in this project, we can only test them for the blood
samples.
And then we can detect them. But not because they are easily transferred in the body to different metabolites, the other programs. And we don't know which are these new substances. So that's the difficulty, to know what to look for. And that's the reason at the moment, we're having a project now dealing with how to detect them even in Europe. So we hope to be able to do that maybe later this year or next year.
Thank you.
Hopefully. But that's when sending it to the lab. That's different from a urine dipstick which you actually try to test. I didn't have time now to show it. But
Just a quick one. Ketamine. Obviously, you have that as a controlled substance, or is that still, do you rate ketamine under NPSs?
Ketamine is used by the hospitals, so but it is a narcotic substance.
Yeah, right.
So it's controlled.
Yeah.
More questions? No. Then I have one for you, and you get. We don't have much time left, but we were talking about trends and the future, and I mean, we in Sweden, both you and me, think that we have this in a we have pretty much of it here, and we have had it for quite a lot of years. But if you look into the future, and if you can see the trends going on, I mean, I saw your list. What do you say about it?
Of course, you can have a list like this and try to work out who should I prioritize for. Which substance can I predict is the main one within the coming months? And that's impossible to do, of course. But you can look at effects, and I would say that a lot of this is actually something that people, or the young people, chat about on the internet. You can get a lot of information by being on the internet yourself, to just get some use from it. And I think that's the only way to do it, to deal with it. And to try also to pick it up, like analyzing. Because a lot of these things, we saw this in this project, is that what they actually taken is not good. We have this MDPV epidemic in Västerås. But when we look at the samples from a lot of these patients, that studied 7 of them from the intensive care unit, we end up with not only MDPV, we have the methadone, we have methadone, we have ethylene, we have desoxyribonucleic, we have amphetamine, other substances as well. So when dealing with it, in my point of view, at the hospital level, It's very difficult because it may not be even in every field. It could be something else. So I would say that for the future, to see is impossible.
Imagine how easy it would be for me to look into the future.
Yeah.
Thank
Have
you
a
very much.
class coach.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you very much.